Now the types of hay are going to vary a lot by geographic location. They might depend upon the station. We're going to make a different hay here in Casper, Wyoming than my friends down in Texas are going to make. And so it depends upon where you're at and what you're going to grow. Alfalfa is going to always be a popular one, and hopefully you've had a chance to read through those 2 PDF articles that talk about alfalfa, especially in the importance that it has to the western United States. Smooth brome is another very common species of grass. It has good tonnage. It has decent nutritional value. It has good palatability, especially if you get it cut young. As it gets a little old, things start to turn their nose up at it a little bit. Timothy grass is another very popular one, especially some of our horse people. Timothy is always a really good grass. Orchard grass is a great one. In fact, I buy some orchard grass from a local rancher farmer here in Casper. Makes good feed. Sudan sorghum or sorghum Sudan, sometimes you'll hear it referred to as cane or feed. I know where Jamie, my wife, were on there, they grow a bunch of this and they just call it feed. And this is sorghum Sudan grass that would probably get 8 foot tall. They'd go through and swath it and make round bales out of it. You can make hay out of oats and barley and wheat, especially important though that you harvest those before they start making a lot of the seed or that inflorescence, but it does make good hay. Down south in Texas, they grow peanut hay. They grow the peanuts for the peanuts themselves, and then the tops or the leftover they make into hay, and it actually makes a very nice hay. We can make clover. Sometimes we can call things like prairie hay, which are just going to be native grasses. And in this picture right here, I'm guessing that there's some elevation based upon the trees we see in the background, and it looks like a native grass hay or maybe a Timothy mix. When I lived in Elk Mountain, about 7,500 foot elevation down there, they grew a lot of native grass and some non-native grass, and some of the non-native species were things like Garrison creeping meadow foxtail, but it's slightly different. So again, the species or the type of hay can vary wherever you're at. Okay, making hay is nothing more than dehydrating some type of a forage. And we need to cut it, we let it dry out, and we try to get that moisture down below about 15% moisture, so then we can bale it and it can store. Making hay is nothing more than storing or preserving a forage for somewhere later in the year or subsequent years. I tell a story about when I was in college and I was working for a rancher, and we had rode up into their forest lease up in the mountains. And in the feed shed at this forest lease, we were 8 miles from the trailhead on horseback. They had a couple of bales of hay stuck in that feed shed. And I asked how old that hay was, and they said at the time that hay was probably 25 years old, meaning those bales had been sitting there for over 25 years. They'd been kept dry. They'd been able to keep the rodents and the mice out of it. And because it was down at a low percent moisture, it was preserved until it was either eaten or it got moisture or some rodent got into it. Okay, and so really moisture are going to be our biggest determining factor at how long we can keep hay preserved. All right, so in temperate regions of the world, like here in Wyoming, we make hay in the summer when the feed is good so that we can have feed the following winter and spring. And as we look outside, and I talked earlier about how things are greening up, most ranchers in the region are getting ready to kick those livestock out to grass. Okay, we kicked our cows out on some grass last night, in fact. But we've been feeding hay on those cows since about the first of the year. In subtropical regions of the world, like if we get down in the southeast United States, they may put hay up either early in the spring or parts of the winter when the weather is more appropriate. And then in the summer, when it gets really hot and it's approaching 100 degrees every day, their forages get real bad, and then they may need to feed hay during that time of the year. So they're almost even the backwards of where our hay feeding season would be in the northern climates. Okay, the drying of hay or that dehydration is started by mowing that hay or swathing. We call it swathing now. So in this picture, we see somebody sitting on a swather. He's cutting what looks like alfalfa, and we put it into these rows, or we call these windrows, okay? And this allows that hay to dry and dehydrate. It allows the sun to cure it and help bake that hay, if you will. Okay, but really it's about dehydrating the moisture out of it. And there's a lot of factors that can determine this, and if you've ever made hay, you've probably cussed one of these factors before. It could be humidity, it could be wind, it could be temperature, it could be the density of that hay. If that hay is really thick and heavy, those windrows get big and it takes longer for that hay to dehydrate. I know at the college ranch, It takes almost twice as much time for that hay to dehydrate when we make our second cutting in late August or September, especially as we get into September, because it's cold and we get a heavy dew on it every night, and it just takes a lot longer for that hay to cure than it does when we cut at the end of June. Depending upon these environmental conditions, it might take you 2 days, it might take you 1 week. I mean, I've heard bad stories of people that keep getting rain and dew, and they have hay in the field for a month. Okay, and that would obviously be an extreme and something that would be nice to avoid.